In this video, I've attempted to survive as long as possible in the You Have One Day challenge in Project Zomboid. In the challenge, you have 24 hours to prepare for the horde of thousands of undead, all appearing from the map edge to converge on your location. Make use of rooftops, hardware, and strategy to keep the hordes at bay. To make things more interesting, I'm going to be playing as the weakest possible character. Our protagonist is a man born with all the negative traits. Weak, very underweight, claustrophobic, chain smoker, hypochondriac, hard of hearing, hearty appetite, thin-skinned, clumsy, conspicuous, among a plethora of other deficiencies. If you want to watch these runs live, I streamed it to Twitch and posted the VOD to my VOD channel so you can watch the whole thing if you want. So I spawned in on the first day, July 9th, 9 AM, 24 hours before the flesh eaters would descend upon my location, hungry for brains. Upon spawning in, I was already in a state of panic from my claustrophobia at being in an enclosed bedroom. What were my immediate needs? Food. As an underweight man, I would require sustenance. So I went downstairs to the fridge and began drinking soda, as many calories as I could fit right from the get-go, to gain weight and start strengthening my weak 60-kilogram frame. Next, water. I used the bottle, emptied of soda, to fill with water from the sink for hydration. The road ahead would be thirsty, and as a completely unfit man, I would run out of breath simply from crossing the street. Now that I had fuel for the road ahead, it was time to hit the town and start scavenging. So I exited the south side of the spawn house and walked, not jogged, my way across town. As I passed the diner, I stopped in to consume a gallon of ice cream out of the back and begin putting weight on my frame for strength. Despite the sense of urgency, I made careful not to run at all because of my severe asthma. I stopped into the hardware store and I grabbed a hammer, a saw, and some planks off the shelves. Then I got insanely lucky when I found a sledgehammer located on one of the shelves. I assembled all my tools in a great spread on the ground below me. I got to work. Now it was mid-morning and time was ticking before the arrival of the ghouls. I would require sanctuary and safe lodging for the next steps to come tomorrow. So I made my way to the largest, most secure structure in the nearby vicinity, the apartment building, located at the center of town. I cried out aloud to create a great rumpus and bait the ghouls from the building to shuffle out in a large blob. One by one, they processed out of the structure, drawn to my scent. I used a pitchfork from the hardware store to dispatch a few that had come following me around the corner. One had a duffel bag. If I lost them here, I could lead them away from the building, where I'd spend the next day making my preparations. After a short lap around the alleyways to break sightlines with the rest of the horde, I killed the last few ghouls that blocked the entrance to the lower floors of the apartment building and made my way inside to begin dismantling furniture and making my preparations for the encroaching onslaught. After I took out the first few ghouls in the lower floors, I crafted a sheet rope from their clothing and prepared it near the second floor window as a means of emergency escape. With that out of the way, around 4:40 in the late afternoon, I sealed myself off from the lower floors once and for all. Safe at last, I ascended the emergency sheet rope and drew it back into my living space, isolating myself from the undead below just a few hours before their arrival. The first phase was over. Now I'd managed to survive that first day and got myself to general safety. But now I embarked on the greater task of making sure I'd have enough food and water to survive days, weeks, or even months in this building. Heaving a sigh of relief, I spent the next couple of hours from 5 to 7 p.m. securing each and every room in the upper floors of the building, now cut off and isolated from the ground below. Staying on my toes, a couple ghouls I made short work of, not due to my skill, but the pitchfork I'd found. I was tired, anxious, and drastically winded. I retired from an exhausting day shortly after midnight, though I was unable to re-energize fully since I was a restless sleeper and waking up still groggy around 7 AM, only hours before the arrival of the undead. Since I had cut off the lower floors with the sledgehammer, I would be safe in the near term, but what about when their numbers rose? So I shifted into long-term planning. My safety was secure, but what about food and water? So I inventoried the food in the fridges and cupboards, and I decided that I would probably have enough supplies to survive for maybe a few weeks. I was already gaining weight after all from eating so many fatty foods, but I need to eat a lot more if I wanted to gather the strength required to realistically fight my way back into the town. I set out on my grind. I deconstructed furniture for carpentry skills. I ate food to achieve gains and get stronger. And I observed from the temporary safety of my apartment as I bided my time getting stronger and digging in to prepare myself for the next few weeks of self-improvement. By the evening, when I peeked out from the safety of my perch on the second floor, the streets were crawling with undead. Dangerous, but out of my reach. As the streets grew with the ranks of undead, the second day drew to a close. At dawn on July 12th, I sledged the way out of my apartment and built a walkway to the north so I could get a better look at my surroundings from on top of the roof of the building beside me. There were hundreds of ghouls in the streets. Resigned to my interior life, when I returned inside, I set about the lengthy task of consuming the last of the perishable foods in the refrigerators and freezers. I cooked beef, sausage, and salmon in the oven. I was already gaining weight and strength, fast, 63 kilograms and rising. And so from the third to the fourth day, I dismantled objects for carpentry skill, cooked and ate the last of the meat in the refrigerators and freezers, and filled some of the pots and pans with water, in case it would shut off anytime soon. Life was good on the second floor and above, but I would need to expand, since eventually I'd run out of food, and I simply didn't have anything I could grow. The hardware store to the southwest of me had seeds though, and if I built my way over to it, I might be able to live up here indefinitely. So in the evening, I took back out my tools and sledged to the southern wall of my apartment, then built another catwalk out to the building adjacent to mine on the south side. My kingdom was growing, but as I called out to the hordes of undead surrounding the building to get their attention, I felt very overwhelmed. I'd need to create some sort of distraction if I wanted to cross over to the supplies. So faced with the precious dwindling time, food, and water in my own building, along with the increasing numbers of the dead below me day by day, I got right to work and built another platform of catwalks further south toward the next building, the promise of future security in sight. I spent the next few days preparing the wooden planks for my crossing to the next building. And on the morning of July 16th, one full week into my survival, I set out from the safety of my apartment to the south once more, with the looming threat of a staircase, feeding up the dead from below, staring me straight in the face. Then after all that preparation, I made one very big mistake. Since I couldn't destroy the tile at the top of the stairs, I left a minuscule opening, a tiny crack in my defenses, where one by one, a trickle of ghouls rushed in like water, on only the smallest bridge which they could balance. Massive folly. Before I even had time to react, there were tens of them on the rooftop. I tried to seal the bridge, but there was simply no time. The horde was too fast, and they followed me back into the apartment, and I had to retreat up the stairs to save myself. How much would I cut off? Just one floor, then two it became as they pursued me up the stairs. I was agonizing over how much to cut off and how much safer it would make me. All this while they were drawn to the banging sounds of my sledgehammer. At last, when I cut myself off from them, having sacrificed 2 whole floors of supplies to preserve life, I finally sealed myself in once and for all. It was just past 6 a.m., and I was exhausted. What would I do now? That was weeks' worth of food and water I'd left downstairs, now swarming with undead. I gazed down from my shrinking island of safety at the rooftops I'd worked so hard to secure, now teeming with them. All that preparation gone to waste. Then things went from bad to worse when, in an instant, there was a loud bang, and all the lights and electronic devices shut off. That was the last of the power and water. Now I was truly derelict, stranded on a sinking island, surrounded by death. I slept briefly, but when I arose in the morning, to my surprise, when I looked out the window, most of the ghouls had left the rooftop, flowed back out like the tide. Now, perhaps there was a brief window of opportunity, so I seized on the chance to gather my strength with the last of my food reserves in the upper floors. Now I could take back my territory. So quietly I patched the bridge I'd destroyed and prepared for the dead to come up the stairs. One by one, though, they heard me. I tried creeping and staying quiet, but I failed. More and more flooded up the stairs, and though I could handle 1 or 2, the tides kept flowing to an overwhelming number. Thinking fast, I cut myself off once again, just like before. What else could I try? If they could hear me rebuilding, then making my way back downstairs by the traditional means was out of the question. What resources did I have left? Sheet ropes and nails, but not enough of them. Or, if nothing else, I could take off my own shirt and fashion it into a sheet rope. And so that's what I did. I waited until later in the day, and by the time they'd lost interest in the apartment once again and flowed back down the stairs, I tied all of my sheet ropes together and took off my shirt, and descended silently from the window just above the catwalks I'd constructed earlier. It was a risk, but one I'd have to take to avoid a struggle and reclaim what was rightfully mine. This time, luck was on my side, and it worked. Safe at last. At least for now. Now I had time to plan once again. I'd need to get stronger, so I started training my skills. I crept around on the rooftop to farm some levels in light-footed and sneaking, training my stealth. And I continued eating and building up strength, now 70 kilograms and rising. On July 18th, the 9th day, I kept sneaking on the roofs, 2 full levels now in light-footed and sneaking. And at last, after much waiting and preparation, the next day I crossed back over the catwalks and sledged the last hole in my defenses, rendering my territory safe once again, and sealing the final patch where the ghouls could enter. And the final open gap to the hardware store lay right in front of me, just past the southernmost rooftop. But I knew for the last stretch I'd need everything I had in me. The next week, as I inched my way over, board by board, toward the hardware store, still gaining weight back into normal territory, but dwindling in my precious remaining food and water, the hordes outside grew to unfathomable masses. Did I even have a chance? That being said, I still managed to pack on levels in fitness, strength, light-footed, and sneaking. Maybe my only shot at running in and out quickly and quietly if I ever managed to get down there, or at the very least, go out with a bang. By the last days of July, I had finally busted my way above the hardware store, and I was almost ready to descend within. But not before I hit the ideal weight of 80 kilograms, and fitness and strength level 2. I would be ready to outrun them, and escape in a moment's notice. To further my strategy and set a distraction, I staged alarm clocks to ring at midday on the roofs to the north, hopefully to divert their attention away from my target. Finally, by August 1st, I dismantled the last of the floors in my apartment for the necessary building materials to make my descent. I trained my sprinting to be ready to flee by running around in circles on the roof, and I tacked on the 7th levels of light-footed and sneaking. It all led up to the 6th of August, when at last, I called to all of the nearby hordes to distract them from my primary target building and throw them off course. I pinned down the sheet rope and made my final descent into the hardware store, now to locate the precious seeds and food to seal my eating and sustenance for the next weeks and months to come. Undetected, I had made my entry, and when I peeked into the cupboards, food of all kinds. In only the room I had made my quiet entry. Chocolate bars, orange soda, peanut butter, even cigarettes. I'd spent weeks in anxiety since I hadn't smoked at all. For the first time in the entire month, I was finally relieved of my depression. But then, after I was done rummaging, I heard a noise. 1, 2, and 3 heard me. I think it was just the sound of me rummaging about in the upstairs, but who can really say? It wasn't so bad. I even waited to make sure the way was clear. But after dropping off my supplies in my next descent, 50, maybe even 100 had already made their way upstairs and were swarming about like ants. Just the insane folly. The rest is history. Before I even set foot to the floor, I joined the ranks of the living dead as one more gray, nameless face. But I had made it farther than any claustrophobic chain smoker had come before me. It was a splendid life. As always, I'm Ambiguous Amphibian. A big thanks to my patrons, who are somehow both claustrophobic and agoraphobic. Until next time.